How's everybody doing today? Good. My name is Jeremy Jahn, which most of you guys don't know that because everybody knows me as the Kokanee Kid. But that's me. I just wanted to ask a couple questions just to kind of see what we got for the group. How many people have been kokanee fishing for a very long time? Well, I don't know, over 10 years, let's say. Okay. How many people do we have in this room that are beginners? So just starting out, just got their boat, trying to figure things out? More or less. All right.
Not a few times.
So we got more beginners than we do more advanced people. What I'm going to do with the seminar is I'm going to talk about how I go over my trips or what I'm planning on doing and the things that I do to try to have a successful time out on the lake. And then we've got tons of time for questioning. I'm going to go over my scent recipe, which I have up here that you guys can take a picture of. They do have all the products in store here at Fisherman's, so they're available for purchase. They are in 3 different locations, so if you need me to go over there and show you where they're at, but they do have all the products that I use for that as well. And then I'm going to go over electronics, what I have in my boat, how I have them set up, and how I use them to fish areas and places that normal people wouldn't fish. So I don't know, you can go ahead and scroll to the next one. So I do have a YouTube channel. I don't know how many of you guys follow me on YouTube, but I do fishing reports on it, which I give out information on local lakes, what's going on. I do have a lot of people that call me and talk to me. So it's a great place, like if you want to know, like, hey, Jeremy says Detroit's not fishing very good right now, he wouldn't go fishing there. It's just going to give you an opportunity. But I do weekly fishing reports. Now, I don't do them weekly. I didn't do one last week, but usually I go through and say, hey, this looks like a hot spot to fish. I keep this on your radar, give you ideas of where they're at and stuff. So I'm pretty open and formal. So if you do come across it, please subscribe. It helps me out dramatically. So, but it's a great place to get information. Okay, maybe scroll one more. So last year, my wife and I, we'd been talking about going to a place called Flaming Gorge, which is like the holy grail of Kokanee lakes. My wife was at the Sportsman show, and a lady, a couple friends of ours, Carly and Bryce, came up and said, hey, you guys going to Flaming Gorge next year? And my wife goes, I don't know. And she goes, you say that every year. And my wife got home and she goes, you know, we do say that every year, let's go. And I said, well, I've never been to Flaming Gorge and it's huge, so I'm gonna have to make some phone calls, try getting some information. So that's kind of the first step that I do when I'm gonna fish a new body of water or somewhere that I don't know anything about. And Flaming Gorge is kind of on the east side of Utah, and it also borders Wyoming. So this is the Wyoming side of the lake, this is the Utah side of the lake. And what's kind of a bad thing for out-of-staters going in is you have to buy a Utah license and you have to buy a Wyoming license, even if you're fishing just the Utah side or even if you're fishing the Wyoming side. And then there's also a couple other permits you got to buy for Wyoming fishing, and the licensing was $200 a person to fish there, so it's pretty expensive. So I did know some lure manufacturers that have guides that usually guide out of buckboard, and buckboard's up in the upper area of it. And I called them and said, hey, how's the kokanee fishing been at Flaming Gorge? And they told me, don't waste my fuel. The fishing is very, very slow. They usually have a kokanee derby up at buckboard, which was canceled the year that I went. It's also canceled again this year. Most of the guides have pulled out, and now we're fishing south over by Strawberry, which is another Kokanee Lake down in Utah, and most of the guys are targeting Mackinaw. There's an overabundance of Mackinaw in the lake and some smaller Mackinaw that they call pups, and they actually want you to keep all the smaller Mackinaw, and we'll get into the Mackinaw that I kept because they weren't very good eating. So I met some people. I called, I talked to a guy that was at the Sportsman show that I was at, and he told me that he liked staying at Lucerne Campground, which is down over here in the Utah side. And he said it's got a pretty nice campground, and I'll show you a picture of it. So this is, go ahead. Go one more. Yep, so that's a campground we stayed at. It's a really nice campground, really close to the boat launch. Never fished the lake. All I was told was don't fish it. The fishing's been horrible there. So, but I wanted to go. I wanted to check it out. I've always wanted to fish it. My dad's always wanted to fish it. So I wanted to see what was going on. And can we scroll back one? This is the area that I was camped at, and the boat launch is here. And when I pulled up my map system on my Garmin unit, the wind normally blows this direction. I figured there was probably some creeks over in this area. So this is where I first started fishing, was over on the Wyoming side up in this area. And when I got over there and I turned on my Garmin unit, I was marking some fish deep, but they were definitely Mackinaw. Mackinaw don't have as big of an air bladder as what a Kokanee has, so they're usually not as bright of a color and a little bit of a smaller line, especially if they're deep, than what a Kokanee will have. A bigger air bladder, be redder, a lot bigger mark than what a Mackinaw was. So it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a Mackinaw and a Kokanee. And I wasn't really seeing anything. And we were trolling around for about an hour, no bites, no nothing. And Carly had to go back for a phone meeting, so we drove back to the boat launch, dropped her off. I pulled up my map system, and I noticed a line that went across the lake, which was up here, and it said pipeline, and there's a pipeline hole. This is where I ended up finding some Kokanee up in this upper section up here. I'm gonna have you go scroll one more. And what I did, this is my wife, this is the first fish that we caught. What I noticed was there was a lot of boats fishing up against this rock wall up in here. And what I do, this is what I do at Odell or other lakes where I see a lot of boat pressure. I usually try fishing off of the boat pressure, thinking that the fish can't swim into the rocks. So if the boats are scaring the fish this way, they're gonna come out towards me. So this is where we got our first fish. And when I first hooked the fish, what I did is I killed my boat, went dead in the water. Part of the reason is I didn't want to lose it. It was an oversized Kokanee. And then we reeled in all the other rods, which I started out doing that, but as I started fishing it later, and because we were there for quite a while, what I would do is if we caught a fish on the left-hand side of the boat, whoever grabbed that rod, because I was fishing 6 rods at the time, they grabbed that rod. The other 2 people would grab the other rods and clear them, so I had the one side of the boat completely cleared. And then I take my boat and turn it directly into the fish, which does a couple things. One, it slows down that rod and that side so the person has time to reel in that fish, and it's also gonna swing my gear out of the way of those fish. The fish, when they hit, they just slam the rod. This one had taken out about 190 feet of line. I told my wife that she had all day to reel it in, just don't lose it, because we didn't know exactly what it was. I did see it jump a couple times, so I figured it was probably a Kokanee, but there's something different about fishing for bigger Kokanee than there is for fishing for smaller Kokanee. Like, let's say you go up to Detroit, or I go up to Odell, you know, you're not stopping the boat, you're reeling them in, you can kind of force them in directions. These bigger fish still have soft mouths, so you still have to take your time, go easy, reel them in, let them rip line if they want to rip line, you know, take your boat, maneuver it in the direction that the fish are going, and try not to lose them. We didn't hook a lot of fish when we fished Flaming Gorge, but we only lost 2 fish out of all the ones that we caught. And you'll see my wife's just working this thing in. Took us quite a while. So it's just a little bit different of an animal than it is fishing a lake that has smaller Kokanee in it. And you'll see the one thing that I've noticed we fished another lake that I'll talk about, but the bigger Kokanee up at like Wallowa Lake, Flaming Gorge, and then another lake we fished with Anderson really want to stay deep. They don't really want to come up in the surface, but that was the first Kokanee that we caught.
I've caught salmon smaller than that.
Yeah, I know. It was big. Yeah, it was a nice fish. We were pretty excited about that. Yeah. So, but then if you go fish a lake like Crane Prairie, which I don't know if people know that Crane Prairie does have Kokanee in it, or Wickiup, the fish are nuts and go surface and rip line and go crazy. These guys have a tendency to want to stay deep. So it's just kind of a slower bring in. Okay, we can switch, next one. I'll just show you, that's the picture of the first kokanee we caught at Flaming Gorge. And I told my wife, I said, if we don't catch any other fish, I said this picture right here was worth the whole trip. So yeah, we were pretty excited.
How big was it?
That one was like 21, 22, but he was probably close to 4 pounds-ish. Yeah, pretty nice fish. Okay, let's go to the next one. One of the things, this was an ongoing joke that we had in the boat. I get this from a lot of people that call that are fishing lakes that have bigger kokanee. Always want to know if I can tackle with the size 2 Gamakatsu hook. And so I just want to show you that I did not change my hook sizes. I did not change my leader. I didn't change my leader length. I didn't change my dodgers. I didn't change anything. I fished the exact same way I'd fished Detroit, Odell, Wickiup, any of the other lakes. Same set, you know, same 8 inches, same size 4 gammy hooks. And I just want you to see how buried this hook is. This is a size 4, it's popping out of his cheek. And this one's actually through his jaw up on the front. There's no way this fish was gonna come off. And that was with a size 4. So the reason I don't like upsizing my hooks is because you're adding weight to the lure presentation. And then if you add weight to your lure presentation, you're not gonna get the same throw with the Dodger. So every time we hooked a big fish and it was just, you know, his face was just jammed shut, I'd always joke, I was like, man, we should have used size 2s today. But we didn't, we used size 4. So don't think that because you're gonna go fish a lake that has bigger fish in it, that you need to change your hook size. Actually, when I was younger and I used to do lots of steelhead fishing in the river, a size 4 was my favorite hook to catch steelhead, which are way bigger than what you're gonna catch a kokanee. So here's another one of my wife reeling one in. This is a little trick that I like to do on the boat. We were actually done fishing for the day. And when I'm done fishing, usually I'll say, hey, we're gonna be done fishing. And the first thing everybody wants to do is grab a rod, pop it, and reel it in. And I say, no, we're not doing that. We're gonna do it slow. So I usually take a rod, pop it, put it in the downrigger, back in the rod holder, bring the downrigger weight up, unhook everything, get it, let that rod slowly go up through the water column. And then once the Dodger and the lure hit the top of the water, we'll reel in that thing, unhook it, take the next rod, pop it, let it slowly go up through the water column, unhook the weights, get everything geared up. You got to do that anyway. And this was a fish that we caught because my wife popped it, put it up in the rod holder, was bringing up the downrigger. It was setting out for an extended period of time, and wham, we caught another fish. So if we would have just jerked all the rods, reeled them all in super fast, there's no way we would have gotten that last fish of the day. And in the video I say, hey, how'd you catch that one? She goes, oh, I just let it free. Sometimes if I'm up at Odell, I'll actually take my downrigger and drop it down like super deep, like at 90 feet, pop it, put it in the rod holder, then bring everything up and unhook it, let it go through the whole water column, and you got an opportunity for that presentation to catch another fish. And sometimes I've done it before where I've caught, like, out of my 6 rods, I've caught 4 fish doing that, just dropping it down, popping it, and letting it naturally go up. But it's a little trick that I do, and that was one of the fish that we caught. Let's go to the next one. So if I use Garmin electronics on my boat, this was an area that I was fishing a little bit north of where that pipeline hole or line hole is at. And this is a little area that I called the Devil's Horn. And if you know my dad, he likes renaming stuff that means absolutely nothing to nobody. So when you ask, where were you fishing at? He'll say some name and nobody's ever heard of it because so I renamed this the Devil's, it kind of looks like a Devil's Horn. But it's super shallow. There's some really weird looking weed patches, and I'm gonna show them on my electronics in the front. And I believe that they were tumbleweeds that had piled up in the lake bottom. But I can see in front of my boat so I can get around them and go up into these shallows. And when I went up into these shallows, this is where I was really marking a lot of kokanee and catching quite a few kokanee up in this area that nobody in their right mind would go up in. I mean, I was hugging the bank. My wife would be like, aren't you gonna turn around yet? And I'm like, no, I'm not yet. I'd get up in about 30 feet of water, make my turn real careful, come back out. There's a couple ways that I was doing this. One, I was fishing really high in the water column, so I had 2 rods at 10 feet below the surface and 2 rods at about 15, or 2 rods at 5 and 2 rods at 10, and I had a really short setback. So I was only using a 30-foot setback. Most of the time, if you hear people are trying to catch fish up on the surface, they're saying, oh, you got to run it 120 feet or 180 feet or 200 feet. We can't make tight turns with that much line out behind your boat. So the fish that I was catching, if you can imagine, were 10 feet below the surface and 30 feet back from my boat, and I was still hooking fish left and right. So don't think that you have to have a ton of line behind your boat because you're fishing shallow. And the perfect story I have is one time I was out at Wickiup with my dad, and we're fishing, and the fishing was a little bit slow, and I told him, I said, I don't think we have enough line behind the back of the boat. And my dad's like, whatever. And I said, well, I'm gonna put 150 feet of line out behind the boat. So I put 150 feet of line behind the boat, put it in the rod holder, wham, get a fish on. I go, see, Dad, this told you we have to be way back behind the boat. We're scaring fish. And this fish is going crazy and nuts, and it's ripping, and it finally comes off the hook, and I reel it in, and Dad goes, oh, that was great. He goes, what lure were you using? So he puts on the same lure, and he runs it like 30 feet back behind the boat, puts it in the rod holder, wham, fish on, reels it up real quick, and nets it. He goes, well, it sure is a lot easier reeling a fish 30 feet behind the boat than 120. So you don't have to go 5 miles behind your boat. I do not have a electric troll motor, so I have an actual, gas powered prop, which you'd think would scare the fish. Yeah, kokanee are not as scared of your boat as what people think. I have videos of my ball trolls off of my weights with fish swimming right next to it. I have cable, so I have not switched to braid. I've got a video with Cody Herman up at American Lake. We did a video, and we actually had a kokanee come. We mounted a GoPro to my downrigger weight, which is a elongated stick weight, mounted the GoPro, and the fish actually came and hit the camera with his face. Just slammed it as hard as he could because there was a little light on it. Didn't like it, so he was slammed it. So kokanee are not as scared of stuff as what you think of. So this is the little area, this Devil's Horn. This is the area I really started marking the fish. There was a lot of people that were fishing out a little bit deeper, like in the 70-foot water. They saw me going in and catching fish. They would try following me in, and I'd usually look at the boat and I go, oof, that's not gonna be good. And then pretty soon all the rods would be snagged, and then they weren't going in anymore. So because of the electronics I had, because of the electronics in my boat, you can see this is in front of my boat at 40 feet. These are the piles of weeds. And if you look at my fish finder, you can see it doesn't look like a solid bottom. It's got this kind of, I believe these are all tumbleweeds. But because I could see in front of my boat, I could see the weeds. I knew I wasn't, like my depth, I was only down at 30 feet, so I knew I was gonna pass over the top of those weeds. I can also turn the boat left or right to get out of them, but there's these weed patches, and you can see my lines are up high. The weeds are in here. So because I could see in front, I could avoid these weed patches. The other thing, go to the next one. There was a lot of fish that were hanging on the outside of these weed patches. There's a fish way up high off to the left. You can see him right up at the top. The weed patch kind of comes up like this. There's a little blue thing up there. That was actually a kokanee that was hanging off of that weed patch. So I was marking a lot of fish that I believe were feeding on some type of an insect or some kind of bugs or something, or maybe there was some zooplankton that had piled up into these weeds, but these weeds were really holding a lot of fish. So it seemed like the closer I could get to these weed piles, the closer I could get to the rocks in the shallower water, the more fish that I was catching. Let's go to the next one. Here's another picture way up inside the Devil's Horn. You can see sometimes I'd mark fish a little bit deeper, drop my rods down to 40, the bottom's at 60 feet, but I'm way up into these little narrows marking fish up in there. So just using your electronics, to figure out where the fish are at, where they're holding, and being able to be more diverse where you can make tight turns and do stuff is gonna help you in the thing.
Do you use down scan at all? Help identify 'em?
I don't use the down, so the question is, do I use down scan? So the down scan is a high definition view of what the lake looks like. And what it is it runs at a super high frequency, so you can see trees, or you can see, like there's a spot up at Wallowa Lake inside the marina that looks like it looks like junk to me, but somebody would think it was fish. There's actually a boat down there. and so you can look and see at that. But that high def scan, your fish look like little itty bitty dots, is what they look like on them. And the reason is because it's running at a super high frequency, and so it's really small. It's like taking a laser and going down below your boat for noise. And the fish don't have a lot of time to hang in the noise circle, so they just come up as little dots. Where if you're using a regular sonar, they're in the sound circle for a longer period of time, and then you're going to get your arcs and you're going to be able to see what it is. I do use that high def if I see something weird on the bottom and I want to see what it is. The first time I fished Lake Merwin, I was launching, and some guy said, "Hey, there's a whole bunch of fish right outside of the launch here, just from about 60 feet all the way to the bottom." And I'm like, "Hey, thanks, man, that's great." So I went out there and I turned my fish finder on, and I'm looking, God, boy, that looks really weird. What is that? And I turned my high def down. Well, they're fir trees. I didn't know there was fir trees in the lake. Like, all my friends I called never said, "Hey, make sure you watch out, there's tons of fir trees in this lake." So because I had that, I knew they weren't fish, but I ran my electronics for so long, they didn't look like normal fish stacked up, but they were fir trees. So there's a picture of a mess of kokanee that we were catching, and I was letting everything go that was 16 inches or smaller, which was a fight on the boat. Well, that's a really nice fish. I go, "Yeah, but we're not keeping it."
Like
So,
a dozen of the ones I catch.
yeah. So anything 16 inches and smaller, I threw back. And
There was less limit there, right?
yeah, you can keep 4 per person with a 2-day limit in possession, and we were there for like 14 days. So, but I'll show you how I got out of the limit in possession thing. There you go, smoking them. So we had prepaid boxes for, there's a postal service in Manila, which is a town just outside of our campground, and we had the flat rate boxes, which you can put as much weight as you possibly can in it, and we just ship them to our house. And then I'd call my son and say, "Hey, you're gonna get some smoked fish, put them in my freezer when you get home." So that's what we were doing. We were smoking the fish and sending it home. I tried figuring out whether if,
You want my address?
yeah, I know, that's what I came home, I don't think I had all the fish I was supposed to have. I think my son took quite a few of them. But we talked to both Utah and Wyoming about the 2-day limit in possession, and if they see that you're an out-of-stater, they're gonna check you. So I asked if I could can them. They're like, "Nope, can't do that." They go, "You can eat them," and I said, "All right." I said, "Well, can I ship them home?" And they're like, "Well, yeah." And I was like, "Well, I'm not gonna, get these freezer ones and flash." I did bring a freezer with me on this camping trip, so I could freeze them. But smoking them was the easiest way to do it, and then shipping it home, and then my son would put them away for me. So that's how I got, so we could keep more than what we were. But I wasn't there to catch a whole bunch. I was there to catch some big ones. And for the most part, I talked to some guys there that have been fishing it for years and years, and they said the kokanee fishing used to be so good, they would spend the entire day Mackinaw fishing, and then when they were about 20 minutes ready to go home, they'd throw their kokanee gear out, catch their limit, and they'd be off the lake with just some huge ones. So the fishing isn't as good as what it was, but for me personally, catching big fish, I mean, I'm used to catching lots of little ones, but big ones, they're pretty fun.
Sounds like that's not a place where even if you toss it back, it counts against your catch limit. There are places like that.
Yeah, so like Washington, if you are using bait, they want you to, keep it. This one doesn't count like that. Yep. Well, that's just my dog driving. Yep, go to the next one. So that's another nice one that we caught. So we, let's go to the next one. No, let's go back one. When we were there, it was a 16.5-hour drive from my house to Flaming Gorge. And so we made it in one trip, just bathroom breaks and lots of energy drinks. So, yeah, I know, it was horrible. We were about 4 hours out. My buddy was like, "Hey, let's stop and camp." And I'm like, "No." I said, "We only got 4 hours, let's keep going." So they wanted to stop somewhere between Boise and Twin Falls, which was kind of a halfway point. And I said, "If we're stopping in Idaho, I'm fishing." So we ended up fishing at a place called Anderson Ranch. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, Anderson Ranch, which is up here. So this is where we camped. We camped at a place called Fall Creek. Camping is pretty primitive up there. It kind of reminded me of going up to Green Peter back in the day when you saw everybody camping on the side of the road. That's kind of what it reminded. If there was any pull-out, any little thing, people just right on the, let's go to the next, right on the next thing. This is Fall Creek where we were fished at, and this is where I found all the fish. We're up in the creek. We went pretty early in the year, so the fish seemed like they were hanging high in the water column and close to the edge. This is the road that we drove in on, and it's dirt. My gear got really, really dusty. It was horrible. Single lane road, really windy. When we first pulled in there, my wife was wanting to know if we were lost. I said, I don't think so. I think we're doing good. So we drove in there. Let's look at it. This is my campsite on the side of a hill. I had used 4-wheel drive to get into it. Once I got my campsite set up, it wasn't too bad. And this is the marina. Let's go to the next one. There you go, Fall Creek Marina and Resort. It's basically a bar. Yeah. So, yeah. And tons of people with you know, side-by-sides and stuff. They're camped all over, going all over. But it was a fun trip. I'm supposed to go back this year, and I haven't decided if I am. I'm gonna go fish a lake called Payette up in McCall, Idaho, is my halfway. We're going to Wallowa. I'm gonna go to Payette. The camping's a lot, it's more city-ish. I mean, this is really difficult to get into, but it was still fun. Let's go to the next one. That's the size of the fish that were at Anderson Ranch. There's a batch of them that we caught. I believe you could keep 15. Again, I wanted to show size 4 hooks. There's no way this guy was gonna come in. He actually has this one through his bottom gill plate, popped out through the other side. I do use gammy hooks. The gammy hooks have a very, very small barb on them, which you would think would not work good for kokanee fishing because you think that they've got soft mouths, you'd want a little bit bigger barb for them to grab. But with the smaller barb, when you get them in a tough area like a jawline, it'll actually punch through. And I've had it before where the entire hook is punched through and then rehooked on the top of the head, and then they're not gonna come through. So I do like the punching power of a gammy hook to go through a fish to get a little bit better hookup.
Style of hook are you using?
I'm just using the size 4 octopus. Yep, size 4. There's some more fish. This is me using my sonar. So this is kind of what I was getting at with the seminars. Don't feel like that you have to fish in the same places or you can't go outside of your comfort zone. This is a really popular area up at Odell, but not a very popular place where I'm fishing. So this is the West Bay of Odell Lake. And has anybody been to Odell Lake? Yep. So the West Bay's got a ton of fish, usually right in the middle. This is way up in the shallows by Trapper Creek. Boat launch is up here, and I just want to show you all the fish that are in 87 feet. And this area up in here, right up in that area, going up in here is a really, really good spot to mark a lot of fish. The one thing that happens up at Odell, the Mackinaw or the Kokanee get a lot of Mackinaw pressure, and you can see I've only got one Mackinaw under these that are here, but the Mackinaw don't really have a lot of room to be from the bottom going up because it's a little bit shallower. But I just wanted to show you sometimes fishing in areas that people wouldn't think are outside of their comfort zone, or even going up in the shallows. I fished that last year. I caught some pretty big ones up in like 40 feet of water. And there won't be anybody in there because everybody's out in the middle, you know, same spot, same place. And sometimes the boats will scare fish out of their normal areas or scare fish into the shallow areas. And I just wanted to show you, this is last year, how many fish were piled up into that bay. And that's what I'm talking about. There's the West Bay. Most people that come out in here usually don't go in these edges or fish the edges or go way up in. I mean, that looks shallow on your map system, but 60 feet of water, you just need to adjust your downriggers, make sure you're not fishing, you know, at 80 feet and going up in 60 feet of water. Let's go to the next one. This is another little area. This is up at Wallowa Lake. I'm fishing an edge pretty close to shore. I'm going to show you how close I was to shore, but there's some fish hanging. You can see them on the left-hand side. I'm showing you with my normal view. You can see I'm marking a big pile of fish that are hanging just off of a dump coming up. and I'm adjusting my gear now to go down to where those fish are at. So sometimes fish are hanging in areas that you're not thinking. This is where we were at. You can see I'm right up next to these docks. Up at Wallowa Lake. And we were fishing in a lightning storm. We actually have a double here. I ran my downriggers down super fast, and we ended up hooking 2 of them. And I want to show you a little error that my wife made on reeling it in. She's gonna love this. So this fish is wanting to pull to the right, and I have 2 of them on right now. I've got one on the left rod, and I got this. See, this fish is wanting to go this to the right. I'm actually yelling at her, telling her to take it over the other 2 rods so we can net it on the right, because I don't like forcing bigger fish into a direction they don't like to go, because if the fish wants to go a direction, you want to keep them going that direction. If you force them away, you're putting extra pressure with those hooks in their mouth, and it might possibly rip out. So I like leading the fish where he wants to go. If a fish wants to go to the right and then he wants to go to the left, I just let him do that. The reason my wife did that and kept it over to the left-hand side of the boat is because she's greedy and she wanted to grab the rod with the other fish on it too. So that's why. And in the video she says that. She goes, "Oh no, I want to catch this other one." I was like, "Yeah, sure you do." So she was closer to that rod by keeping it there. But normally I would want the person, if the fish is wanting to go to the right, you want to take your gear and net him off on the right-hand side. You don't want to force him away from that. So, you know, the netter's job is to maybe run here, there. You don't want the person reeling in the fish to try to force him in the net. You want the netter to net the fish wherever he wants to go. And sometimes if you can get their head out of the water like that, like Dill was talking about the tuna fishing, these guys quit fighting. So you don't want to pull them all the way out of the water, but if you can get their head out of the water just a little bit, they completely die, and then you can reel them fast, and I call it skateboarding them into the net. And you can see when that fish, as soon as it hit the top of the water and its head was out just a little bit, he'll quit fighting, and then you can just slide him right into the net. There's the 2 fish my wife caught, the lucky sucker. All right, so one of my big questions I get, hopefully everybody takes a picture of this. This is my recipe for corn scent. There's a couple things that I do with my corn. I don't keep it more than 3 days. I know I hear people say they freeze it, whatever. I mix it up the night before, very important. Once it's mixed up in the little containers, you can usually make 4 different batches out of a can of corn. I sometimes will only make 3, but I have these little Rubbermaid containers. And this will just explain what you're doing. But I put them in the fridge the night before. On my boat, I have a cooler with a gel pack that's frozen. I bait the hooks, close them, put them back in the cooler. When I'm done fishing, the gel pack goes in the freezer in my camper, and the corn goes in the refrigerator. So I'm really picky about trying to keep my corn as presentable as possible and as cold as possible. It's super, super important. So they do have these products here at the store. Kokanee Killer Corn Magic right here. It comes in 3 different colors here at the store. This is the color I recommend, which is no color. And the reason I say that is because if you go out on the lake with pink corn or orange corn and the fish want chartreuse or blue or something other, you're going to be in a world of hurt. But they'll always hit plain white. So tip of the day. Now, if you do want to go out with pink and orange and plain and maybe some other colors, that's okay too. But I've never really noticed that much difference in a bite. I mean, yeah, sure, if I have pink corn and it's a pink bite that day, sometimes that can enhance the bite, but usually your hands look like they're pink at the end of the day unless you're wearing gloves. But this stuff works really good. Make sure that you don't keep it in your boat. It will draw moisture, so I like keeping it in a nice dry place. But basically what I do is I take the containers, I drain all the water out of the corn. I take a spoon and I fill them up halfway, and what I'm doing is I'm seasoning something and I got bad taste buds, so you're putting quite a bit in, but you're just putting a little bit of that. So,
What was that called?
Kokanee Killer Corn Magic. Yep.
Corn magic.
Yep.
Oh, it's on the thing up there. Okay.
Yep. The next product is garlic slamola. Same thing, just sprinkling it on. You don't want to put too much in it, but you want to put enough where it's gonna put there's some amino acids in this stuff, and there's it's gonna toughen that corn up a little bit, so it's gonna stay on your hook a little bit better. I do like their water solubles over the gels. The reason is the water solubles are more liquid. They're going to suck up into your corn, and they're going to time release a little bit better than the gels do. So my favorite day in and day out is a garlic. Garlic's a natural irritant to fish. Kokanee hit your gear because you're pissing them off, not because they think it's a food source. So there are times you can catch kokanee that they think it is a food source if you're a fly fisherman. I did have a buddy at work that used to catch them up at East Lake quite a bit using these little itty bitty tiny chromamids. I couldn't even see how he even tied them on the line, but just dinky little flies. But for the most part, if you're using a dodger and a lure, you're irritating them into a bite. So garlic, sand shrimp, and anise sand shrimp are my two favorite scents that I've been using lately. I definitely took these on my trip to Flaming Gorge. They worked fantastic. If you're going to a lake that has a natural shrimp in it, like Wallowa Lake has mysis shrimp in it, something with a shrimp smell is going to have a tendency to work a little bit better. So, but that's my recipe. And you can exchange, again, like it says, use the water soluble garlic plus. I'm just replace that with whatever you want. Like if you want to use tuna, like you can make a garlic tuna. That's just what I use. And I do like the water solubles from Procure.
You ever use maggots?
I have used maggots, yep. I've used Potski eggs, I've used salad shrimp, I've used all sorts of weird stuff. Here's why I don't like using maggots. They do catch kokanee, don't get me wrong. But if you're fishing a lake that has rainbows in it, you are gonna be catching a lot of rainbows. And I do not like catching rainbows. So, but they do work. If you're fishing a lake that doesn't have a big rainbow population, and if you don't know Odell, if you're trolling up at Odell, I think out of all the years I've trolled up there, I've only caught 2 rainbows out in the middle of the lake where the kokanee are at. And I'm talking like years of guiding and everything else. The rainbow in that lake, they're native red band rainbows. They hang in real close to shore eating crawdads and stuff. So they're not in the areas where the kokanee are hanging out. So it's pretty rare. And usually if you catch one, it's a real big one. But that lake, you could use maggots or whatever you wanted. You wouldn't have issues. But if you go up to Detroit Lake and you put maggots on or worms or Potski eggs or something like that, you're going to be catching trout left and right. So, I mean, I still catch way more trout than I want with corn, but if you put something else that a trout's going to prefer, then you're going to be catching. If you want to catch both, then it wouldn't, okay, I can see you shaking your head, yes. I do have people that say they want to catch both. I'd tell, normally a kokanee rig has 2 hooks. The top hook, you put a piece of corn, and then on the back hook, a trailer with a worm on it. You know, just hanging off straight works absolutely fantastic. But if you don't like catching rainbow, don't do that. This is how I put my corn on the hooks. I've got 1 piece of corn per hook. I have the cut part that was on the cob facing directly back to the fish, and I have it barely hanging off the bell of the hook. Super, super important. And I'm really picky about how I want to do this. If you put the hook through the corn in the middle, this will rotate around, might go flat. The reason I put my corn on like this is because all the time and effort you did putting scent in your corn is now sucked up inside of it this way. The water's going over it this direction. It's going to make it more time released in the water system. And also having the corn this direction, the water's going this. The water has an easier time going over your bait. It makes your lure more hydrodynamic in the water. So my 2 biggest reasons for doing that. I do see people that'll put 3, 4 pieces of corn. It deadens the action of your lure. So the action of your lure is extremely important. The scent's going to time release, and you're going to get a better action off of the lure. Did everybody get a picture of that? It's super important. It'll literally increase your catch ratio by probably right around 25% if you do it this way. And if I get somebody on the boat that thinks they know what they're doing and they're just not quite, I usually throw it away and redo it myself. So I'm like picky. It's almost like when you're salmon fishing and you're putting on a herring and you got this roll that you want, and if you just didn't care and you threw it out there, you're probably not going to catch very many salmon. It's got to be, you know, a perfect. That's how picky I am with my corn on it. So for that. Let's talk about what we got going on in Oregon, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. So this is a picture of Odell on opening day, April 22nd. This was caught by Scott Walters jigging up there. You can see he didn't catch a lot of fish this year, which I think he was pretty upset about. But the first day he went out, he got 83, which in my opinion, don't really want to clean 83, but he was pretty upset. Normally he likes catching somewhere in the 180, 200, something like that. But I just want you to see the size of the fish. So he did catch a couple that were already in the 14-inch range on opening day. Odell Lake has the latest spawn in Oregon, so you can still catch this year's fish, chrome bright, end of August, beginning of September. And a fish that's going to be in the lake that long is probably going to be 16, 17 inches by we get to that time. So not a lot of fish. Will tell you all the fish were on the east end of the lake, and then they will end up rotating over to the west end, and then later in the season they're going to come back to the east end. I believe the reasoning for that is the cove down on the west end used to have a lot of kokanee that would come in and spawn in Trapper Creek, and ODF and W put a system in there to try to keep kokanee out of the creek so that the bull trout would go in and spawn. So they cut the production of creek spawners. So these fish are kind of, it's almost like they're in the ocean. So they were born on the west or the east end. Now they're migrating over to the west end, and then later in the fall they're going to migrate back over to the east end, where the west ones would be in the West Bay during jig season, which there wasn't any fish in the West Bay. They would rotate to the east end, and then later in the season they'd come back down to the west end. So we're getting a lot more shore spawning kokanee out of the lake. The east end does have a little bit better gravel area for them to spawn. We do have an issue with the whitefish in the lake. There's more whitefish in the lake than I've ever seen in my entire life, and they're eating a lot of the eggs. So the kokanee population isn't as good as what it has been in the past, but we are going to see bigger fish up at Odell. So I'm planning on going up there in July. I'll probably be up there July and August. So if you are going to fish Odell, just be prepared to have to try to find the fish. And when you're looking for fish, look for fish that aren't in huge tight balls. Look for ones that are more relaxed and through a large section of the water column. If you see them in tight balls, you'll see like 3 or 4 big marks under them, and those are Mackinaw. They're going through and blowing them up, and they're now a food ball, and they're not going to want to hit anything you're going through. So if you see a nice relaxed school of fish all over the water column with no Mackinaw under them, those are going to be biters. So and you can go through those tight balls over and over and over again, and they won't hit anything. I mean, I've seen ones that are, you know, from me to the back end of the store there, and it's just a big tight ball with all these Mackinaw under them, and I can't get them to hit anything. But if I find a school of fish that look nice and relaxed, no Mackinaw under them, those I can usually stay on, keep them hitting, and we can catch some fish. So that is Odell. This is a lake that I fished on the opening day. This is Wickiup Reservoir. 2 years ago, we had a high water event, and they were taking a lot of water out of Davis and out of Crane Prairie, and a lot of kokanee came into Wickiup last year, but they weren't very big. I mean, they were big, but they weren't very big. And so what I figured was this year there had to have been some fish that had been in the lake for 2 years. They didn't drain it all the way to the point that they normally did. So I took a hunch and I went over there, and boy, they're nice sized fish. Yeah, that was a fun trip. Really hard to stay on the line though. I will tell you, I was running a real short setback at 30 feet, but a 30-foot setback with a kokanee from Wickiup, they would take the line and just shoot like left 400 miles an hour and then shoot towards you. I did end up going to 50 feet just because of the way that they were fighting. It gave them less chance to make the circle around me. They had 50 feet of line instead of 30, but the hardest fighting fish that you will ever catch for a kokanee. They do have a little bit of a different food source here and at Crane Prairie. They do eat a lot of black bugs. So if you are going to go fishing there, I would recommend getting something that has some black coloring to it. That usually works pretty good. My super micey bugs in orange and black worked really good. I know the darker twisted hoochies work good, and the black and white twisted hoochies were working good. But black is, that's their food source there. So I will tell you that the fish, and I'm really being nitpicky, but the fish at that lake don't taste as good as a normal kokanee. And I'm just saying that because I'm picky too, but I've eaten a lot of kokanee. The best tasting kokanee you can get in the whole world is at Wallowa Lake. They're blood red, tons of fat content. Even the little ones are, I mean, they're absolutely gorgeous. Best eaten fish I've ever eaten. These are on the lower end of the scale of what I would want to eat. I definitely wouldn't eat these past probably third week of June because the water temperature is going to get really warm. These fish, they can't get down into deep cold water, so they're hanging out in the mud. They're eating bugs and stuff out of the mud, and they've got a little bit of a trout taste to them, in my humble opinion. I did give some to my sister, and my nephew ate one and said it was the best fish he's ever eaten, but to me, he made it some sriracha something, so it probably didn't taste like fish anyway. But for me, when I cook a kokanee, normally it's got like a little bit of lemon on it, some pepper, and then I cook it, and that's it, and then I eat it. But it wasn't the best tasting fish in the world, but fantastic fighter. So if you are thinking about hitting Wiki up, I'd hit it really fast. Detroit. Now Detroit had been fishing pretty good. It is slowed down. So here's my theory on Detroit Lake. Same thing, fish are pretty nice sized. I've heard some in the 16-inch range caught there. We had a lot of rain here just a little while ago. As everybody knows, we're living in Oregon, and the water level went up really, really fast. Anytime you're in a lake that has a water level go up super fast, it usually kills off the bite. So Odell doesn't raise, it doesn't fluctuate, it's the same all the time. But Detroit, you'll get big drops, big raises. It got a huge raise. The turbidity level went through the roof. It picked up a lot of debris, and the bite has been extremely slow up there. I would expect probably starting Tuesday, the bite's gonna pick up again. We're getting some warm weather. It's gonna warm up, everything's gonna clear out, it's gonna flatten out, and then the bite's gonna be good. But that's a good one to keep on your radar. We're good, no. So anybody, green Peter, don't fish it. There's no fish in green Peter. I know a couple people with some really high-end electronics went in it. One of them, Scott, he can see everything. He said he marked 2 fish, and they were definitely bass hanging down by some stumps. So they did dump some trout in there. I'm not a trout fisherman, so I don't want to do that, but that lake's basically dead. I figured since they dumped all the fish over, maybe Foster would have some kokanee in it. I have not seen any pictures of any kokanee caught out of Foster as well. I think what happened was when they went from really deep into real shallow, they got the bends. I don't know if you saw the pictures, but there was a bunch of dead kokanee. I still figured some of them would have survived, but I haven't seen any evidence of any fish being over there at all. Wallowa Lake, I did see a few pictures earlier this season of somebody jigging up there. They looked like they were nice sized fish, but getting any information out of anybody from the town of Joseph's like cracking a tough nut. So you're not gonna get squat. So it's usually, I mean, I might be able to ask like, hey, did the lake freeze over? Which is normally good because it keeps the water temperature a little bit warmer and the fish will eat all winter. It didn't freeze over this year, but that doesn't mean that there won't be big fish. I will be posting a report. I'm leaving the 20th of this month to go up there, so I can give you some more information. But that lake's really hard to get any information. I did see some pictures of Subtle Lake, really small fish. They looked like they were 10 inches. He said they were like 8 to 9. I wouldn't recommend going there. He did catch a nice brown, but I'm not into that. The fish at Billy Chinook are running on the small side, plus they have a skin disease, a little copod. I would definitely skin those if you do keep those. And Paulina Lake has not opened up yet. That opens up on the 15th, supposedly, and they did up the limit for Paulina Lake, for East Lake, and for Crescent Lake. You can now keep 10 kokanee per person per day, just as long as you don't keep any trout. So you get a 5 fish bonus limit, so you can keep 5 kokanee, and then you can keep 5 trout, and you can exchange trout for anything in the lake that doesn't have a restriction. So you could keep like 9 kokanee and 1 trout, but you can't keep like 6 trout. So you technically can keep 10 up at Detroit, Paulina, East, and Crescent. Crescent is at 16% full pool, so I'm guessing nobody's probably gonna fish that anytime soon. And East Lake's got a water issue as well. I believe a fissure opened up, it's a volcano, and the water level just hasn't quite been up to And there's some people that launched some boats, but it was pretty sketchy. But Paulina is going to fish good this year, so I'm just telling you.
You haven't mentioned Merwin hardly at all.
Merwin. So Merwin did the same thing. It shut down too. So
You say shut down for fishing?
no, it's not shut down for fishing, but because we had all this water coming up, it's slowed down a little bit, and the fishing's been a little bit tougher than normal. My buddy Sean back here fishes it. What size were they up at Merwin?
I mean, they were pretty decent size even early in January. I was catching 12 and 13.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much slowed down a lot now.
Yeah. So it slowed down quite a bit. I did see, I mean, if you guys are from Washington, Roosevelt's got some really nice sized kokanee in it this year. I know they're tougher to catch. You can only keep 2. Well, yeah, technically you can keep 5, but only 2 of them can be what they consider native or not be fin clipped. And if you do catch one that's fin clipped, they call it a ghost. So, which means you're not going to catch one that's fin clipped. So basically you can keep 2 kokanee up there, but they looked really, really big. Actually, next year I'm going to go up. We're going to go up to Roosevelt. I'm going to go hit, which has a state record for Washington. Priest Lake in Idaho has a state record for Idaho. And then I'm going to go up into Canada, up where the old world record was caught, and see if I can snag one. Chelan's been fishing really well too, and they look like they're bigger this year than it cycles quite a bit, but they look like they were pretty nice size up there as well.
All I've done is Merwin, fairly new at this couple of years, but we tend to catch a lot of pike minnow.
Oh yeah.
What is there anything we're doing that could change that, or just a chance you take?
You using corn
Yeah.
and still catching them? Yeah, you're not gonna be able to do anything. Yep, you're just gonna catch them.
Should we change the depth or something?
No, not necessarily. No,
Just gonna happen.
it's just you're just gonna catch them. It's like up at Detroit early in the season. We're catching all these small Chinook smolt, and you couldn't keep them off your line. I mean, doubles, quads. You see this little itty bitty, it's like crap. Throw it overboard. Yeah, yeah, it's a pike minnows. Yep. So I'm gonna open it up for questions. We got any questions? Yep, in the back.
Any reports about Rife Lake?
Rife Lake. No, I haven't heard anything on Rife. And I think, doesn't Rife have coho in it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So no kokanee in there, but they have coho. But yeah, I haven't heard anything. There's not, you know, I have some people that'll call me and tell me they fished Rife, but it doesn't seem like that one gets fished as much as other lakes that would be in my radar realm of, and I don't know if it's because it's coho. I don't know. Yep.
Have you ever doctored up fresh corn?
As in, you know, I haven't. I mean, I've heard people say that. I just use Jolly Green Giant. That's the corn I use. I was super scared. They changed the label about 4 years ago or 5. And I was thinking, oh crap, am I gonna have to go to every store in the state of Oregon and buy all the old stuff? But it still works. But no, I haven't used fresh corn. And it probably, I'm trying to think how would that, it might even stay on your hook a little bit better.
I was thinking it'd be firmer.
Yeah, but I haven't tried it. I'm sure it'd work. I mean, I probably could put anything on the back of a hook for the Coke. I mean, they're not eating your thing because they love the taste of corn. They're just pissed off at it, and it's an irritant to them. So it probably would work. But just for me, I just usually, sometime in December, January, I usually buy 2 cases of white Chopaic corn, so I'm not hunting around for it at the last minute, and you can't find it because everybody's buying corn now. And then I just stockpile it, and then I have it. So, yep.
What's your optimal leader length behind the Dodger?
Yep, optimal leader length. So if the lure doesn't have its own independent action, so wedding rings, spinning glows, hoochies, beaded spinners, 8 inches. And that is 8 inches, right on the dot.
That's to the end of the last hook?
It's from the top of the barrel swivel to the top of the lure, 8 inches.
8 inches.
Yep, 8. If the lure has its own independent action, like an apex, a wiggle hoochie, a hot shot, and there's all sorts of stuff, then I don't want the Dodger to mess up the action of that lure, so I run it 28 inches back.
Okay.
Yep.
So like a mini Kokanee plug or something?
Something like that. Yeah. Or Brad's, one of those little Brad's things. And you don't have to use a Dodger at that point then. You could use like a Mac Lure's flashlight. It's just basically now your Dodger's not an actual Dodger. It's just an attractant to bring the fish in to hit the lure that's already moving. The reason you need a Dodger for something like this is this just sets and plays sit and spin in the water and doesn't do anything. So I need this Dodger to throw this lure to get the action on it. So 8 inches. And I hear people say, you know, you should go a little bit further back, early spring. I make the determination on how much action I'm getting off my lure off boat speed. So boat speed's super important. If I have 12 inches and 10 inches and 15 inches and 8 inches, all the same lure, they're all gonna have different action, and you'd probably notice a different bite. You're not gonna get the same bite. If I have them all at 8 inches and I get my boat speed at what I consider perfect bite speed, or I get the perfect action for the kokanee to hit, all my lures are gonna hit because they're all tied at the same leader length. Does that?
Preferred speed?
I like slower in the spring and winter, so 1 mile an hour or less. And then once we get a little bit past spring, I might be doing 1.1 to 1.3. And if I'm fishing late, like late August, September, I might bump my speed all the way up to 1.8, a little bit faster.
Okay.
So the fish are running slower because the water temperature is colder, so you want your presentation running a little bit slower. And then as that water temperature warms up, those fish are going to be moving faster. I had a well, up at Odell at the west end. I stay at the east end now, but there was a lot of old timers down there. And if you ever get a chance to talk to an old timer that's fished a lake for a long period of time, it's fantastic information you can get. Some stuff you probably won't do, but this one guy, he said he used to take a cage on the side of his boat, and his first kokanee he would catch, he would unhook it and throw it in the cage and lock it. And then he would watch the fish. If the fish was swimming and it was going back to the back of the cage, he was going too fast, you need to slow down. If it was going to the front, you need to speed up. And I go, wow, that is ingenious. I go, he wants to go the speed that the fish are doing. So he'd do that, and he'd kind of figure out his speed, and then that'd be the end of that. And I went, yeah, that's pretty smart. I was like, yeah, just a little, you see what those fish are.
Pre-GPS days.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I mean, it sounds stupid, but in my brain, I'm thinking, God, that's like some really cool technology you're getting with. Probably didn't even have electronics back there. I mean, nothing. Yeah, so he just had a cage and wanted to see how fast the fish were swimming so he could go the same speed. Yeah, he wanted it right in the middle of the cage. That was pretty funny. So.
You ever prefer Dodger, or you just?
You know, I like the Aero Flash Dodgers. I was the one that did the prototype testing for Tom. He's a local company here, Tom Hester. This used to be an Uncle Elmer lake troll. So they had this size and one size smaller, and it was a lake troll. And he came to me and he said, hey, he goes, I'd like you to see if this works as a Dodger. And I looked at it and I said, well, it'll probably work, but it's probably gonna drag like a barn door and I won't wanna fish with it. Well, lucky for me, they're fantastic. They have a huge speed variance on them, so they work anywhere as slow as 1 mile an hour, all the way up to about 1.7, and then they might start rolling. They kick like a mule, and they don't drag real bad. So when I tested them out, I was out fishing anything I had in the boat like crazy, and I told him, I said, hey Tom, I said, I'd like you to make me some colors and let me test them out a little bit longer, because I was the only one on the lake that had them. So he makes me some more colors, and I'm testing them out some more, and I'm like, yeah, let me try them out a little bit more. I want to see. And then I finally went to him and I said, hey Tom, I'm going to be honest. I said, I think you found the holy grail of Dodgers that everybody's been looking for, and I'd like to give you some design options and stuff. And so by far, hands down, I have not found anything that works as good drag wise, because I like feeling the fish all the way in. I mean, I use some higher end rods and stuff, and then the speed variance that you get with this. If you use like a skateboard style Dodger, you know, you get it up past about 1.4, it'll start rolling. The sling blade style Dodgers work better at higher speeds, but not at the lower speeds. They just don't quite have the roll that you want. So you got to put a big bend in them, then they drag really bad. So this, for just an all in out, I really have a hard time getting away from using these Dodgers. And I have tons of Dodgers in my boat. But for me personally, the only thing is they're not real heavy. So for flatlining, they have a tendency to want to stay up on the surface, but I just hook, like if I want a top line, I just hook it to my downrigger and just drop my clip just under the water, and it'll bring it down a little bit. So, but by far, hands down, best Dodger I've ever fished with. Yep.
Aero Flash.
Aero Flash. They do have them here at the store. Yep. Back in the Kokanee. There's got quite a few of them. Some colors I've never seen before too.
Well, I know where the Kokanee section's
Well, I'll show you.
I know where it's
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah. That's where this was at, the Kokanee Killer Corn Magic. The garlic slamola was on an end cap, and then the scent was in the scent aisle. So it's 3 different locations. Yep. We got any other questions? Line. Okay, so do you downrigger fish? Yep. So for line, I like a small diameter line. 8-pound test diameter is what you want. And the reason for that is if you're using downriggers, if you're using a real heavy line, you're going to get a lot of blowback in the water. So something that cuts the water really good. For your leader, for your lures, I prefer 15-pound test. And if I could put size 50-pound test on size 4 hooks, I would. So they're not leader shy. The heavier leader does a couple things. It gives you more throw from your dodger because it's stiffer, and then also Kokanee do an absolute horrific job destroying your lures. They damage them bad. The heavier leader is going to make it so that you can fish this lure longer without having to retie it. So
mono,
all on mono. I use a fluoro clear on this.
but otherwise mainline mono.
Yeah, just mono. Yeah. You don't. I mean, you can use braid, but the braid has a hard time coming out of clips. It'll be a little bit sticky, and then you don't have any stretch with the braid. And because you want Kokanee, they got soft mouths. That little bit of extra stretch you get with a mono, I think sometimes can, especially you have people that don't know what they're doing on the boat. I had a couple that I took guiding, and they go, "Yeah, we hook lots of fish, we just can't land them." And I'm like, "All right, we'll figure that out." Well, the lady, they were using braid, and she'd get the fish, and then as soon as the fish got to the boat, she'd point her rod right at the fish. So now you're not using any bend in your rod. She has braid. There's no stretch in that, and the fish was popping off. And I said, well, now I figured it out. So you got to lift your rod tip up. So she goes like this, and I go, nope, lift it up. I said, nope, lift it up. I go, perfect, just like that. And I said, no, it'll be great. So I like my rod tip up high. 1, you get better bend out of the rod, but 2, you have a tendency to lift that fish's head out of the water system, and if you can get that head out of the water, that Kokanee just, I don't know what it is, but they do not like having their head out of the water until you net them, and then they go crazy again. But they're,
Ducks do the same thing.
yeah, it's really weird. So if I can get that head out of the water, and then I reel as fast as I possibly can because I just want to right in the net. You know.
What do you look for in a pole for Kokanee?
So for poles, I like one piece. I definitely like one-piece rods. I like blended rods. You really want something that's got a soft tip, but then it's also got some backbone. This rod here was made by a guy in Eugene, Ryan, and this is a custom rod I had made for me. I'm trying them out. This is actually a Rain Shadow blank. But I like the handle to be stiff, because then I have control over, let's say, a bigger Kokanee if I go to Flaming Gorge, but then I still have all the softness for the fish's mouths, because even the big ones have soft mouths. This is a Lama glass rod that I have. This one here, again, same thing. You can see this is a custom rod that I had them make, but from here to the butt of this is all graphite, so this does not bend. And then from here up, it's all glass, so this all bends. So it's like the best of both worlds. They used to make an all yellow one that was glass all the way down, and you could actually take the handle and bend it. And if you caught something that was over 16 inches, or you hooked into a big Mackinaw up at Odell, that fish would just run you all over the lake. This thing I can really, I mean, if I hook something big, I can reef it in, but I can also control a little bit of fish. The other thing I like is, I like my handles. I had to make this handle a little bit longer for me. One, I like being able to put it, in my elbow here. I can get a little bit better feel. Also, you're gonna feel the fish fight better with a stiffer handle and not having a 2-piece. If you have a 2-piece, you got a dead spot in your rod. It's not gonna bend real good, and it's gonna kill some of that action. For me personally, I like feeling every little bit that the fish wants to give me. My dad, we used to long line back before we got downriggers, and I used to tell my dad, this is not fishing, this is harvesting. You got 4 ounces of weight with a lake troll and you're going, and I hated it. And then we got downriggers, I was like, wow, this is really fun. They jump out of the water and you can let them take line. So I like using lighter reels. I used to not use line counters. I am using line counters now. This is only an 8-ounce reel. I used to like my reels about 6 ounces or less, just for the feel. But having these line counters have come in real handy in being able to keep my gear all out at the same level. Like when I'm surface fishing, I like my back downriggers I want out at 30 feet, and my side downriggers I want out at 35. So everything's in a line behind my boat. So if you do get, especially if I'm fishing a lake with bigger fish, usually they're not hanging in packs of 50, they're in packs of like 3s, 2s, you know. And if I've got, you know, presentations in a row and I got 2 fish coming in to check it out, there's one for this guy and one for that guy, and I have a better chance of hooking into a double with my stuff all in kind of in the same section there. And the other thing that's nice is if I'm stacking downriggers, which is putting multiple rods on one downrigger, and I've just put one out and then I put another one out and I catch one, I can take this one and I've got let's say a 30-foot setback. I just reel it up to 30, clip it on the downrigger, and I go down. So I'm not going to check the corn because I just did it. So handy in a couple different ways for me personally. And it's lightweight. It matches the rods pretty good. It is, I mean, technically it is a little heavier than I like, but they work really good. So it's a Daiwa Alexa, and I am a left-handed guy. I know some people are going to go, what are you doing? They do have a right-hand retrieve, but this has been, I'm running strictly all these right now on my reels. Make really good stuff. Length of the pole, you want somewhere between 7 or 8 feet. I like 7.5. It fits in my gunnels a little bit better. I do know people that'll run 8s out the side or 7s out the back, but something between 7 and 8 is what you want to have for down. I mean, you could use a longer one, but then you're really kind of out. And
For long lining too?
wow, for long lining, yeah, you could use an 8-foot. Long linings when you're not using your downriggers. I usually use a steelhead rod. I didn't bring one with a soft tip. Usually I have that loaded with braid. Reason for that is I get a little bit better action off of my lake trolls with braid because there's no stretch. Then you're using inline weights, usually a rubber snubber. And if I do fish that way on my boat, my wife won't reel them in. So that means I have to reel in the fish. She goes, that's your rod.
What kind of releases do you use on your down?
So I use a Dubros release. I sell them on my website, but it's basically a little red release that you have a screwdriver that you adjust it with. The line goes in and it pops out, and it's too much work for me. Yep, you got to loop, wrap. All I want to do is go snap down, and it's the same release every time. And I can adjust it as light as I want if I'm fishing a lake that has smaller, like if I'm up at Wallowa and they just decide to release a bunch of rainbows that are this big, they'll actually pop my releases off, and then I know I got a rainbow and I'm not dragging him for an hour till he's dead. So for me, it works good. The bad part about it is if you and your buddy want to go out and he's using a different brand or a different diameter line on his reels, you'll have to make adjustments. And then when he's off your boat, you're gonna have to adjust them again. So I just tell people when they're on my boat, don't bring anything. Yeah, I got all the rods and reels, so you don't need to bring anything. So, yep. Because there's a different, like if you're using 10 and he's using 8, you're gonna have to adjust them. Yep. Or if I go Mackinaw fishing, I just crank them down a little bit, and put a plug out, and I can still use them. So for me, that's just easy, pop in, pop out. Yep. Pretty easy.
Can you talk about when you choose silver plate over gold plate Dodgers?
Yes.
Lake conditioning?
Yep, so I normally like silver and gold when it's sunny, and I let the fish tell me what they want. So, and there are days where you can have, so this is how I go through it. So let's say I'm running pink, I'm up at Odell and I'm running pink and orange, which is usually what it is for colors. I'm running pink on one side of my boat and orange on the other side of my boat with different dodger options. I might have, some ones with pattern dodgers. I am doing pink with pink and orange with orange. So if I have an orange colored dodger, I am running that with an orange lure. And I start nickeling and diming some fish on this exact setup right here. It's a silver, which is a neutral color, so I can use any color lure I want with this. But I have a silver blade on this, if you can see. So I got silver and silver. And let's say I'm nickeling and diming a few of them on it. The first thing I'm gonna switch to is this in gold with a gold leaf, and just to see if the gold's gonna hit more than that one. Everything else is the same. I got the same corn, same leader lengths, And I will tell you that sometimes just making that little change between silver and gold, or from gold to silver, it can be just lights out fishing. Just, you know, I mean, you're gonna catch some, but then, you know, I might do something like, well, maybe it's silver, that I'm catching a few, but now I want to try this with a smile blade on it. So I put a smile blade on it, see if that gets the bite up. Or maybe I take this dodger and I say, well, maybe they want a pattern dodger, or maybe they want a glow dodger. There's just little changes that you make. It's almost like you take a radio station and you're kind of getting it, and then you just kind of slowly tweak your variables. Like maybe my boat speed needs to be a little bit more, or maybe I made a turn and all of a sudden the rods on the inside of the turn all got whacked. Now I know, well, maybe they're wanting my presentation a little bit slower, because as I made that turn, my stuff on the inside slowed down, or maybe the stuff on the outside picked up because I made it a little faster. My brain instantaneously goes, well, let's just try slowing the boat down and see what happens. So, you know, and then all of a sudden, ooh, that was the deal. I had a trip up at Odell with my wife, and I couldn't not get the fish to bite. I mean, they just lockjawed, marking tons of them. And I had two buddies up there, and we're calling each other back. What do you get? And what do you? I said, man, I'm just not onesie twosies. And the wind picked up a little bit, and all of a sudden I had 4 rods go off. And the first thing in my brain, I looked at my boat speed, and I was doing 1.8 miles an hour. And I went, huh, that's interesting. We reeled them in. I kept my boat speed up at like 1.8, 1.9. I mean, way faster. And all of a sudden I'm just killing fish. Like left, I call my buddies, all right, your boat speed's too slow, speed up. They all, and then everybody limited out just from boat speed. So I mean, I don't even know what he was using for lures. They just wanted a faster troll that day. So sometimes it can be just little subtle things. I always say it's usually not something big that somebody's missing. It's usually 1 or 2 little things that makes the difference between catching 10 and 50. So, and then there are times where people are way off in left field, but
What do you tend to transition to when it's first thing in the morning, it's still relatively dark?
Yep.
You go to painted finishes?
I go painted or glow. Yep. And then I like glow lures as well. So like this here's a pink micey bug. This has got glow paint on the hook, and all the beads are glow. So I'm taking a UV light, I'm charging these up, then I'm charging up a glow dodger, then I'm deploying it, and then I'm trying that. So anytime it's cloudy, I'm charging these up. Once the sun comes out, you know, I'm not worried about it too much. The sun's hitting it, it's gonna charge. But anytime it's cloudy, first thing in the morning, I am taking a UV light and I'm charging these things up, which is a black light. You can buy them on Amazon. They're dirt cheap. I got some that have these big, huge heads on them. I don't remember how many bulbs are in it, but I can just set it on, and it doesn't take very long. You just charge one side, charge the other, throw it in the water, and you're good to go. But definitely charging these up helps out a lot, especially. Boy, that's a great idea. That's a great question. I love that question. Question was trolling direction in the sun. So I actually like trolling with the sun off to the side of me. So I don't like trolling into the sun hardly ever. I feel like I'm throwing a shadow down on my gear. And then if I troll away from the sun, I'm getting full sun. But if I can get the gear, if the sun's this direction and I can troll back and forth this way, I feel like I'm getting the best of both worlds, which is not normal direction for Odell. They usually want you going east to west. But if I can go north to south on Odell, I'm definitely doing it. Yeah, yeah. So that's where I prefer it. Does it make a difference? Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes I'll go, you know, where the sun's at me and I'm not catching anything. I turn around and I'm in the same spot and wham, 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 I'm hitting them. I feel like maybe my gear's getting a little bit more reflection off of it. But that's a fantastic question. I don't know if I've ever been asked that one. That was a good one. I like that one.
If you're not catching anything, what's the first thing you're going to change? What's your number one thing you change first?
Well, it'd probably be my location if it was me. So if you do have good electronics, you do see that you're marking fish, then I just slowly start going through the tackle box. Usually lure color is my first variable that I figure out, and then it's action on that lure. So those are my 2 biggest variables for catching them. Sometimes, you know, maybe they want pink, but maybe they want pink with something a little bit bigger, or maybe they want a bigger blade, or maybe they want something that runs more erratic. Well, if I know that I'm going through fish, I'm usually switching out. So if I go through a big ball of fish, Well, Odell's a little different. If I go through a big ball of fish with 500 Mackinaw under it, they're not going to bite anything anyway. But if I go through a school of fish that I know are going to be biters, I go through that school, I go through another one, I'm switching out. Now, I'll find something that's nickel dime in it. I always leave that on, like you're catching one every half an hour or whatever. I'm not going to switch that one out because I am catching some fish on it. I'm going to switch the ones that haven't caught anything, and then I start rotating through gear until I find a winner. And then when I find a winner, they're all running the exact same dodge or exact same lure. You know.
When do you change scent?
Scent, I usually use one scent on one side of the boat, one scent on the other, but I will tell you, out of all the variables you're going to figure out for the day, the scent is probably the last one that you need to figure out. Yep.
So you're not changing corn a lot?
I am changing corn a lot, but I'm not nitpicking myself saying, I wish I would have had squid with blah, blah, blah. That was the hot scent for the day. When you could be using, let's say they wanted pink as a color, and I'm using no pink. I'm using, oranges and greens, and I'm trying to figure out what scent they want. That doesn't really matter because they're not going to hit it no matter what. So if I am using the pink and I'm getting a bite, I might try switching the scent to see if that increases that bite a little bit more. But there's other things that I think are more important, like getting your rods back in the water, because my number one rule to kokanee fishing is you can't catch a fish if your rod's not in the water. So I'm try maintaining my boat so I get stuff back in the water ASAP.
Do you worry about gloves as far as scent?
I personally don't with kokanee, no. Now I wouldn't fuel up my truck and get diesel all over my hands and then start putting corn on it. I like doing that the day before, but and I don't seem to have an issue. I mean, I'm sure there's people that have taken medications or something's going on, maybe they smoke 24/7 or they got something at work, they're a machinist and they got grease all over their hand. I mean, there might be some things that would, but I don't feel like kokanee are as fragile to scent as what a springer would be. Yeah, because I wear gloves when I'm springer fishing, but yeah, they do. They hate everything. You're right. Yeah, but kokanee don't seem to be as finicky in you repelling them off of a scent. Yeah. We got any other questions? Yep.
When you're trolling and you're looking for fish, are you doing a straight shot or drunken sailor? I know you're looking at electronics, but
Right.
that
So
helps.
with my electronics, because I have that forward scan, I can look 400 feet out in front of my boat. So normally I go to a spot and I just do a sit and spin circle. Yep. And then I look and
That on there that's looking out 400 feet.
it's a transducer that looks out in front. It's called Panoptics. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So it looks out in front, and then I can see obstacles, I can see fish, but I can kind of tell. I mean, if you didn't have that and you went over to an area, I might drive a little bit because you might have scared the school of fish away when you're coming in at 300 miles an hour, but maybe go a little bit. Don't see any fish, then don't fish that area because it ain't going to do you any good. So go to another area and see if there's fish. I always try finding fish, and then once I find fish, don't leave fish to go find more fish. Try figuring out what those fish want. That's pretty key.